higher, overpower your distortion signal. Or if you increase your stress, modulation, automation, controls. Hey everybody, today we are doing an in-depth dive on the Tumo Audio Panic Room. I've had this for a few weeks. It was intimidating at first, but we have taken the time to really get to know it. Let's get into it. So my clean signal today is this late 60s, early 70s Japanese guitar, going into an Ernie ball tuner volume pedal, into a Swell pedal I just picked up from other pedals, which allows me to do this. Momentary volume swells up. I could have it going down, but for this demo we're going to use it going up. That goes into the Panic Room, which then goes into the Fuzz Imp Amity, which I'm using as an amp sim. So after the Amity, we have a Cab Sim running a, what do we got now? The Friedman 412 simulation. And following all that on a separate volume control, we have the Poison Noises Hall of Fame reverb. So the Tumo Audio Panic Room can be divided into two sections. We have the controls up top here, and we have the controls on the side here. We're going to ignore the side controls for now and focus on the top. First up, you have your red knob, which is called a stress knob. Really, that's like your distortion channel. So right now it's all the way down. This is where I like to play around with it most of the time, but so next up, you have your VCO gain, your gain, a switch to go from what I call the dynamic mode into automatic mode, and then the mod. Mod is kind of like a filter, kind of like an envelope filter. It reminds me of like bass synths I used to play around with back in the day. All the way to the clockwise, it gets like almost sub level that you can't even really hear what the notes are doing. All the way counterclockwise, it gets harsh, more high pitched. But right now, me turning it does nothing because I have these two controls down. So the VCO gain controls how much of that signal is getting through, but the gain is like your dynamic control. So even with this turned up halfway, we're still not getting anything from that. So around here is where you can play around with your dynamics of your attack. When you go higher than that, around there, you're going to get that mod signal coming through, but it's not going to last with the sustain of the note. When you go higher, it hangs on. on a lot longer. When you go higher with the VCO gain, it'll overpower your distortion signal. So on all of these, you're not really hearing any of that original note. Two ways around that: you can lower your VCO gain, or if you increase your stress, that's how the controls work. We're not really doing anything musical with it yet. Let me show you some of my favorite settings. It's going to take a minute to dial in. I already posted a quick demo video, but I wanted to show you how I got the sounds I got. So this is around here, I think, is where the stutter effect comes into play. Let's try there. I find that super usable. If I want a little more stutter, I'm just going to pull that up ever so slightly. What happens if we bring the mod over this way? We get more synthy notes. Might be overpowering. Let's give it a try. So let's bring down that VCO gain to bring down the volume on that mod sound underneath. Let's see how this sounds. I think that's a pretty usable sound. One thing to note about this guitar, I'm using the middle pickup, and I have the tone rolled back. It's the quietest pickup I have on this guitar. It's probably the quietest pickup I have on any guitar. So depending on what kind of pickups you're using, so let's just switch on the neck pickup here. So we're running a hotter signal now. So with a hotter pickup, you just have to lower your gain for that dynamic playing. That's super fun. All right, let's check out the modulation automation controls. We are back after the briefest of pauses. Alright, so on our right hand controls here we have wave 1, wave 0, cycle, and frequency input. Let's see if that light gets picked up by the camera. Yeah, cool. Alright, so what we have up here is essentially two different sets of sounds. You have your distortion sound, just one knob. Then you have your modulated sound, your filtered sound, controlled by all these guys here. What we have down here and on the side is a set that cycles back and forth between those two sounds. So when you have a sound dialed in here that you like, don't like that, but maybe you do. What we're going to do. Alright, so frequency adjusts the speed that we switch back and forth. Cycle adjusts how much of it is just the distortion sound versus how much is the synthy sound. Further, counterclockwise is much more of the synthy sound. Let's get that in the middle here. So we're going to use that sound to show you what these different controls do here. So we can speed up just how quick we go back and forth between these two sounds. Alright, let's see what these controls do. I don't really know how to explain these except for listening. First off, if you have them both in the middle, so when you have them both in the middle, it more or less mutes the settings for your synthy side. Let's see. Now there's still something going on there, but you don't really get it. Alright, so For the sake of figuring out these controls, we're going to crank the gain all the way up so our synthy sound is there whenever we're playing it. So let's try and take this, do something musical with it. I really prefer it with wave 0 in the middle. We're going to keep our gain all the way up there. We're going to keep this right where it's at. What we're going to do is bring these guys down to taste. Seems like in the auto mode, the mod control over here is overridden. last riff. Let's use these settings. Alright, so there you have it. That's a panic room. It sure is something. I think there's a ton of potential in this pedal. I think if you take the time to get used to your controls on the top before you get into your weird modulation speed stuff, you unlock this pedal. I am definitely going to be using this for some aggressive tunes in the future, but I also think that when you have certain settings dialed in here, I think as aggressive as this pedal can get, there are ways to dial it in more subtly. Thank you to Tumult Audio for helping me make this possible for y'all.